President Trump is promising to save New York City from what he says is the communist lunatic running for mayor. Zohran Mamdani, a self-described Democratic socialist, locked up the nomination this week of the Democratic Party in the New York City mayoral race. His left-wing politics have drawn outrage from Republicans and concerns from some Democrats over what it means for the direction of the party. Joining us to discuss, Rachel Parks from Decision Desk HQ. You know, it's interesting, some of these New York Democrats who haven't endorsed Mamdani, thinking Governor Hochul and Congressman Richie Torres, they came to his defense after these Trump attacks. Do you think that shows that there is an understanding among elected Democrats that Mamdani is a real force, especially within the Democratic base?
I think what this has to do with a lot is really that Mamdani won the Democratic primary nomination, and this is an attack from Trump on this Democratic nominee. And I think what this means is that Democratic elected officials in New York need to kind of close the ranks and support other Democratic nominees, officials in New York and in New York City and amongst the party. I think it has more to do with presenting a strong face as a party and not allowing divisions of progressive or moderate to separate people, but really uniting people under that front and against certain attacks.
I want to take a look. We have this chart that shows the ideological perspective of people in New York. And I think one of the things that's very interesting here is you see 39% of people identify themselves as moderate in New York City. And when it comes to Mamdani, 45% view him as very liberal. There seems to be a little bit of a disconnect there now that we're moving into the general election. If I'm Andrew Cuomo or Eric Adams, I look at that and say, you know, maybe there's an opportunity there.
Yeah, so I think Yale Polling has done a really good job of having people describe either themselves or candidates as what they think of them on an ideological scale. And as we can see here, people identify themselves on a much similar spread of ideological scales as they do to Cuomo. In fact, it's a really striking similarity between those two. And I think what this really shows us is that people aren't necessarily associating with Mamdani because of his socialist policies, but I think that Mamdani's convincing win might have a bit more to do with the kind of candidate that Cuomo has and the history that he has to deal with, as opposed to an association with the specific policies of Mamdani. And there are other polls in this same poll and in other polls that have gone directly to the socialist policies of Mamdani, like the fare free buses. And it shows that a majority of people do not agree with these policies. And yet, nonetheless, last Tuesday showed us a really convincing victory from Mamdani. So I think we see this lack of ideological alignment, and we have to start thinking of other factors that are causing people to cast their votes for Mamdani.
One thing I find really troubling for people that don't want Mamdani to become the next mayor of New York City is this right here, where you have both Cuomo and Adams similarly being labeled as moderates. It would seem to me if the people who don't want Mamdani to be the next mayor would need one of those two to drop out of the race.
Right. You're completely right on that. I think that in a scenario where Mamdani is running against Cuomo and Adams, Cuomo and Adams are expected to break that moderate Democrat vote that maybe Republicans willing to swing to a Democratic vote. I think that Mamdani's best case scenario is for the both of them to stay in the race. And for people who would like a more moderate candidate, they would hope that Cuomo might make the decision to drop out and it would just be Mamdani versus Adams. And in the head-to-head polling that's been available so far, Mamdani does best in the scenario where it's just him against Cuomo and Adams.
Yeah, you know, we talked about earlier about what voters think about democratic socialism as a concept. That label obviously wasn't disqualifying for him, at least in a New York City Democratic primary, which is its own thing. But it strikes me, you know, during the 2024 campaign, liberals often called Trump a fascist, and it didn't work. You know, I think even Kamala Harris called him that. You know, I wonder if you think that the same way that Trump was able to upend what politicians can get away with saying, that Mamdani could do something similar to that when it comes to the term democratic socialist.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a possibility. Mamdani is a really good candidate, and he's run a really good campaign, and he has a lot of other interesting things in his past that might have disqualified another candidate. And I think that he definitely has the potential to kind of turn this label on its head and show that he's something new that's coming up for the party. And maybe this is a good turn instead of something that can be used against him. And it's also New York City, which is a place that's already a lot more progressive than basically many other places in the US. And I think this gives him a good chance to maybe win the general, even though he has the label of Democratic Socialist being applied to him.
Seems like there's a big portion of voters in New York City that don't really know where to place him. They check the, I don't know, or unsure of his ideological perspective. It's like a fourth of the voters that were talking about how they perceive him. I wonder if some of the issues that he's advocating for kind of cut through the ideological spectrum and they don't know exactly where to place that. It strikes me, thinking back to when he was first launching his campaign, talking to Trump voters and what could bring them over to his side. It was these cost of living issues that he's championing now. I wonder if that kind of plays into where he gets that 25% perspective where people don't really know exactly where to place him.
Right. I think it's something new. I think it's, if you go far enough to the left on the spectrum, you end up being associated with certain things that are also associated with people who are far on the right. It's like a circle. And I think that a lot of the policies that he's trying to assert, he would be in a good position if he could show people that there was kind of a commonality, a common ground in wanting to lower the cost of living for all New Yorkers. And I think even just like using the fare free buses as an example, I think that that's something where a lot of different people who might be, lower income, lower education, something like that might be like, oh, that's a really good idea. I would love to not have to pay for my buses. And then those types of really clear-cutting policies can kind of draw people to his side and also show people that maybe there's another dimension to this that's not just super socialist, but something that they can also relate to.
It's going to be a fascinating race to continue to follow, and we'll definitely have to check back with you as it progresses. But for now, we will leave it at that. Rachel Parks, Decision Desk HQ, thanks so much for your insight.
Thank you so much.